Over the last 6 months or so, I have added a few things to my video editing setup that have been massive improvements to my workflow, and I just wanted to share that with you. Now, this isn't going to be a full office build because I am in a temporary rented space right now. So this is all going to change probably in the next month or so, but the components to my setup are going to be relatively unchanged. So I figured I'd share some of that with you in this video. So if you're looking for inspiration or some ideas or some things that might help you in your editing workflow, then maybe some of these things will help you out. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive into it and start off with my main display, and that is an Apple Studio display. It's a 27-inch 5K resolution display, I believe, and it's been a really good display for the most part. I purchased it back in January of this year, and overall, I would say it's a good monitor, but there are some quirks with it that are kind of annoying. Like when I go to plug in my MacBook Pro, I have to do this like song and dance almost every single time that I plug it in to get it to recognize the computer and the mouse. It's just like when I plug it in, it's like the screen is frozen almost, and I have to like open up the MacBook Pro and then close it, spin around 3 times and hope for the best. And finally, when it gets working, it's great. I love the fact that it integrates with my Magic Keyboard, so I can just change the display and the brightness, and if I'm using the Studio Display speakers, which actually do sound pretty good, I can control the volume with the keyboard. So I do like that and just the incorporation there, but I would have expected the compatibility, not the compatibility, but the performance with the MacBook Pro to be much more seamless than I have had with my experience with it. But that said, it is a really nice monitor. It's really sharp and it's a pretty accurate monitor, but I never felt like I could fully trust it because it's way more contrasty than my MacBook Pro. And when I would view a video that I made for like YouTube or whatever on like a TV, it would look a little bit different than that. So I never felt like I could really trust it. But I do like its simplicity and its connectivity, and just plugging it into the Thunderbolt port on my MacBook Pro does make for a cleaner setup. All right, over my left-hand shoulder is the monitor that I trust for color grading, and that is the Asus ProArt PA32UCG-K. Now, that is an absolute mouthful, but this is an amazing monitor. Now, Asus did send this out to me to test and collaborate and make some content on, but when I tell you I did so much research on monitors and displays, and if you look at like my prior video from like a year or two ago about my old monitor, it was then when I started researching monitors, and the ProArt line of monitors kept coming up with just the things that I wanted in a monitor. But it wasn't really until I went out to the Asus booth at NAB this year and really got some kind of hands-on experience with the displays, really got to see the displays in person and got to talk to some of the folks over at Asus, and they were so cool. They answered so many of my questions and they were super knowledgeable. Now, I had to kind of boil down to like 2 or 3 displays. Well, I guess 4 when I saw the 8K display, but I have like absolutely no need for an 8K display right now. But I had to boil down to a couple of different displays, and they actually lead me into the direction of the PA32UCG-K. And it honestly checks all of the boxes. And I wouldn't make a video or mention any of this. I would honestly box it up and send it back if it really didn't check the boxes for me for a color grading monitor. Number one, it's a 32-inch display, which I really wanted. I used to have a 32-inch display and really liked the screen real estate, and it was just a nice viewing experience. It's also a 4K monitor, so it's UHD resolution, and it's a true 10-bit display. It's not like an 8-bit FRC or any kind of weird fake 10-bit combination that display companies, monitor companies try to promote. I even think the studio display behind me isn't actually a 10-bit display, but I really wanted a 10-bit display, and like honestly, when I got it all set up, it was a night and day difference between the studio display and the ProArt display. It's also Kalman ready from the factory, which if you don't know what that means, in layman's terms, it basically means it's like certified and really color accurate right out of the box. But to ensure color accuracy, they actually include an X-Rite i1 Display Pro calibration tool, so you can keep calibrating your monitor every month or however often you want to do it to make sure that you're still getting the most color accurate representation of your content. It actually is an HDR capable monitor with a contrast ratio of 1,000,000 to 1, and it also has a max refresh rate of 120 Hertz, which I know is important to some people like gamers and stuff, but for me that honestly doesn't really matter all that much. But yeah, I was really impressed with this monitor when I got it hooked up and everything, and actually was in the middle of a project and was so surprised at, number one, how different these displays looked from a colors perspective, but also how much better the Asus monitor looked than the Apple Studio Display. Now, speaking of connecting for color grading, I'm not actually running this monitor directly into a Thunderbolt port on my laptop like I am doing with the Studio Display. What I'm actually doing is I'm using a separate I/O device, which is the Blackmagic Ultra Studio Mini 4K. And this is crucial because this sends a pure signal to the display and bypasses the GPU of the laptop. The Ultra Studio 4K also has some other cool features like an SD card reader and like HDMI and SDI in, which is really nice. So I've actually used it for Zoom calls and it'd actually be really great for live streaming as well. Now the crucial thing here is it sends a 4K signal out to the display. Now I'm using the HDMI out of the Ultra Studio 4K Mini into the HDMI in on the ProArt display. Now that's obviously the connection to the monitor, but to complete the chain, you have to connect the Ultra Studio to your computer, which you can do through Thunderbolt. But what I've actually done is instead of going directly into the Thunderbolt port on my laptop, I actually have it connected to my OWC Thunderbolt Pro dock. And then the Thunderbolt dock is then connected to my laptop. So I'm using two of the ports on my MacBook Pro, one for the Studio Display and one for the Thunderbolt dock, which also is connected to my Ultra Studio Mini 4K. Now this thing wasn't cheap, but I purchased it when I was building out my server, which we'll talk about here in a second, but it provides a couple of benefits. Number one, it allows me to connect the Ultra Studio Mini 4K to the monitor, to my display, so I can use it as a reference monitor for in DaVinci Resolve. But it also has 10 gigabit Ethernet on there, and that's really important because I have it connected to my server. So when I'm here, I plug it in and I have really fast transfer speeds to my server, which is really nice. I can actually even edit videos off of the server, which is super awesome. It also has a CF Express B and an SD card slot, which those are the only forms of media that I am currently using. So the OWC Thunderbolt Pro dock is kind of like the central hub for this whole operation. It kind of lets me connect a bunch of different things to it. One of the things that's really cool that I connect to it is the monitor, and that sounds kind of weird because I just mentioned I was using the Ultra Studio Mini 4K. Well, that Ultra Studio Mini 4K really is only for using as a reference display in DaVinci Resolve. When I quit out of DaVinci Resolve, the screen actually goes black, and that's kind of what it's intended to do. It's really meant to just send a clean signal from DaVinci Resolve to the reference display. But there are times when I want to use this display as a second display for like a dual monitor setup. So what I've done is I run a display port from the Thunderbolt dock to the display port in on the ProArt display, and then all I do is just change the input from the HDMI to the display port, and then this kind of turns the ProArt display into like a second monitor for working on non-color critical stuff. Maybe I have DaVinci Resolve on the Apple Studio Display, and then I'll have like emails and client notes or editor notes or something like that on the other display. So while I'm editing, I can reference that stuff much easier than having to flip back and forth with using just one monitor. But when I go to start color grading my projects, then I'll switch back over to the HDMI input, which is the feed coming from the Ultra Studio 4K Mini, to make sure that I'm getting the most accurate signal possible for when I'm doing color work. Now the last upgrade that I've made to my video editing setup is my NAS. I'm using a DS1821 Plus from Synology with 16 terabyte hard drives. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video just because I'm going to dedicate a video to kind of building out my NAS and just the benefits of that, but it's been really great. I've got it connected via 10 gigabit Ethernet, which just means I have really fast transfer speeds, and I can even edit some projects. Actually, I have edited some projects directly off of the server, which is really cool. And it being a server, I can connect to it remotely, which is nice to pull different assets and different things off and kind of declutter and kind of free up space on my laptop, and also not have to travel with 5 or 6 different, T7 SSD drives. So anyways, that's pretty much it for the updates and upgrades that I've made to my kit. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, let me know down in the comments below. If you're interested in any of the other stuff or a future office build or anything about the server, then be sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on all this fun and cool and extremely exciting stuff like a server. So exciting. It's almost as exciting as a new tripod. I mean, anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.